Welcome to the Transforming Lives Coaching Center podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Richards Wilson, and I'm the founder and CEO of Activate Core. We are so pleased to be able to launch our annual virtual book tour with 30 authors from 8 countries. The tour has been just awesome so far. We have heard from authors from different genres. And today, wherever you're coming in from, we have another phenomenal author, mentor, coach, woman of God, spiritual author with us here today. And we are so pleased to have her with us. Please welcome Jennifer Williams. Jennifer, welcome to our podcast, and it's a pleasure to have you on board with us on our annual virtual book tour. Thank you for coming on this tour with us this year.
Thank you, Jennifer, for the warm welcome. Thank you also for adding me to your virtual book tour. I am very excited about this virtual book tour, and I am also excited about the many interviews that I have done so far, and I hope to bring even a little more enlightenment to our listeners concerning my book.
Wonderful. Your book, I believe it's timely, it's valuable, and there are so many areas and intricate avenues to it. It's empowering, and I believe it will transform lives. Before we go into your book, we want to hear your story. Who are you? We want to hear, where did you grow up? And how did you find it within your heart to write a book like this?
Okay.
So it's your turn. Let's hear
I'm
your story.
Jennifer Williams. My maiden name is Juscom. So I use it for my book because in my country, there are many Jennifer Williams.
Yes,
And
definitely.
so I put that in just to make me very distinct from the others.
Yes.
I was born in Kingston, Jamaica, but I grew up in St. Mary, a small district called Epsom, and I also grew up in Port Antonio in Portland. I came back to Kingston after being out of Kingston for a few years, but I have spent most of my life in Kingston. So I consider myself either an Eastern or a Southeastern person because most of my living is concentrated in the East or the Southeast, meaning Kingston. I have been to primary schools in 3 parishes, St. Mary, Kingston, and Portland. But I went to high school in Portland. I went to Titchfield High School, and we had a very good principal, Mr. Geddes. It was a very good school right on the beach there, like you see in the background. And
yes,
so
I know
like
Portland
the
is
sea.
beautiful.
Yes, I like the sea. I like the beach. And I like just the nature that Portland provided for me. So I am a Christian for nearly 50 years. So I bring nearly 50 years of Christian faith, and I have diverse educational qualifications. I have a first degree in management studies, a master's in social policy. I have a diploma in gender and development studies, and I've done a host of other things, including Chinese cooking.
Multi-talented.
Yes, I've done floral arranging, basket and balloon making. I've done a host of other things, jewelry making from the beading, and I've done things like event management. I've done a host of things. But I have worked in the banking industry. I spent a few years government savings bank, 1 year, 1 year at Workers Bank, 16 years at Bank of Jamaica, and 3 years at Central National Bank. I spent 16 years in the government service working in gender and development, and I spent almost 7 years as an HR manager. So I have a wide range of experience, and I've had to make paradigm shifts where my work is concerned, or my career. That's a little bit, but I just want to say that when I was at the Bureau of Women's Affairs, where I spent 16 years, I was able to address topics such as gender-based violence, child abuse, and gender equality for men and women. So my expertise in gender issues and child protection and advocacy is showcased through my various local, regional, and international initiatives. And all of those underscore my commitment to promoting gender equality and children's rights. I also, actually, the Lord gave me this women's empowerment as part of my task. I was driving to work one day and I just heard in my spirit, you are like a Joseph and you're going down to Egypt to bring deliverance to my people. So having heard that, I knew it was the Lord. I was looking at my building
Yes,
in the
yes,
traffic, couldn't get there, and the Lord spoke that to me. So I started to look at the life of Joseph and,
yes,
question the Lord about certain things. And he said that a lot of his people are in bondage and he wants me
yes,
to bring
yes.
deliverance to them. So that is part of it. That is the women's aspect of it. And the Jamaica coordinator for International Association of Women Ministers. And that originated out of Kenya with a lady called Dr. Grace Manjau. So I go to conferences since 2013, almost every year, except the COVID periods. And so
Yes.
I promote women's. Here, I got up one morning, September 2022, and I heard write a book, and the Lord gave me the topic, and the topic is Love Me, Don't Hurt Me. And as we continue this conversation, I will show you how the Lord helped me to develop this thought and this idea into a book that we're now going to talk about.
Wow, a phenomenal, well-rounded, multifaceted woman of God and author. If you're just joining us, welcome to the Transforming Lives Coaching Center podcast. And we're on the virtual book tour with Jennifer Williams, academic and spiritual author. Just type in the chat where you're coming in from. And of course, if you have any questions at the end of this discussion, the floor will be yours. You can ask your questions afterwards. So, Jennifer, Mrs. Williams, you spoke a little bit about growing up and your school in Portland. How did that shape your life? And at what juncture of this life, of this part of your life, did you meet God? Did you
Well,
become Christian?
Portland was a very nice parish, still is.
I love
A
it.
lot
It's
of
beautiful.
rainfall and the river
Mhm.
ran through our premises in Boundbrook. And so the water is very appealing to me because we had several inches of rainfall over the period, daily, monthly rainfalls in Portland very often. But it
Yes.
gave me that serene feel of nature and God and how God works even in our situations. I can't remember a day when I stopped from school because it was raining, because rain in Portland was
Yeah.
so normal and natural that
Yes.
we went to school anyway. But I was brought up by a God-fearing great-grandmother, my father's
Oh,
grandmother.
yes. Yes.
And so going to church for me in my early years, because I lived with her from I was 9 months, she said, because eventually both my parents went to England during the Windrush. And so we were brought up with family members. And what happened is that I got that early injection of God in my life,
Yes.
in my spirit.
Yes.
I heard people pray. I see people read the Bible, and I was
Yes.
taught some things from the Bible, like the 12 sons of Jacob. I could recite them. I could recite the 10 plagues in Israel. So things like these became
Yes.
the norm for me. But when I left her, my pattern of church attendance varied because I never had that steady flow in my life again. But I went to church and then I started to go to the Methodist Church in Port Antonio. I attended for a few years. I was confirmed and everything, but there was still some dissatisfaction in terms
The
of my
urge.
spiritual
Yes. Yes.
development. And
Mm-hmm.
then at the age of 22 plus, when I was attending CAST, I really recommitted my life or committed my life to the Lord. And I have been walking with the Lord since from the 18th of January, 1976. So
Oh,
it has been
before I
a
was born.
journey. Yes,
Before I was born.
yes.
Yes.
It's an
Such a
awesome
journey.
journey.
Such a wonderful,
Awesome
awesome
journey.
journey.
Yes, yes.
And I believe God is using women like us, strategically positioned at this time. You know, there are shifts in the spiritual world, there are shifts in the physical world. We see it happening. But at this time, I believe God is just positioning his women all over the world to really cause impact. And I'm so glad that this virtual book tour has been causing impact and shifts and transforming people's lives globally. I mean, when you look at the reach, we're on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. We're on so many platforms, and so many persons have been saying to us, these authors have phenomenal stories of hope, of trials and triumphs, and we have been inspired. And truly, you are an inspiration. I want to know more about, and I would like you to share a little bit more with our audience about your role in the gender ministry. That section of your life where you worked in that ministry, touching and impacting women who have been abused, rejected, and how it has helped to shape your life and your literary journey as well.
Okay, I've been involved in women's issues since 1997, and that gave me such a wide experience.
Yes.
And it incorporated children's issues as well. And working at the Bureau of Women's Affairs, I was on the board of the Women's Center of Jamaica, where that institution was responsible for taking care of pregnant teenagers and also getting them reintegrated in the formal school system. So I got some experience there. Plus, I did workshops across the island in schools, churches, and communities. And that gave me an opportunity to interface with children and to hear their cry and to hear their needs and to present something to them when we talk about different types of abuse. And I always like to tell this story. The first time I was going to a basic school, I didn't know what to do because I've been to primary and I've been to secondary and even tertiary level institutions like UWI, talking about gender-based violence and some other things. And when I went to the basic school, there were some little ones, and I said, Lord, how am I going to reach these little ones talking about, you know, child abuse and gender-based violence? And the Holy Spirit just drew my attention to the pictures on the wall. Pictures are very important, and they said that a picture is worth 1,000 words. So I started to go around the room with my eyes, and then I saw a picture of Jack, and saw a picture of Jill. I said, the Holy Spirit says, start there. So I said, who is Jack? Me, miss, Jack is a boy. And I said, okay, what makes Jack a boy? And they started to tell me, but they focused on the genitalia aspect, and they gave me some names, Jennifer. I was surprised. The names that they call those private parts, surprising. And they were very animated for about 5 and 6 year olds. Then when it came to Jill, oh, why do you say Jill is a girl? Me, miss. And they told me all of those things again. Some names they called. I can repeat one name here because it's not bad. They said Chocho, but they gave me a host of other names. And so I got them animated now. And we went through that and we talked about a good touch and a bad touch and all of those things. But one thing that never left me, when it came to the emotional abuse, I said to them, has anyone ever called you any names that made you feel bad? Yes, miss. One boy said, my father called me a John Crow. And a little girl said, my mother called me a dog. I said, oh my God, if these children can have these things riveted in their minds from such a tender age, can you imagine when they grow up, what will happen to them? And so I went back to the office and I rearranged my PowerPoint for that tiny age. And I didn't get the opportunity to go to another basic school, but it gave me an opportunity to explore further the whole issue of child abuse, especially among small children. So when I started to write the book now, I started to write for small age. But it got so intense and so complex, and it's like that's part of the challenge I face, because where do you start and where do you stop and where are you going? So at the end of the day, I realized that this was just too much for those small ones. So I turned it into a teenage book, and then I started two others now, ages 6 to 12 and below 6. Those are still on my computer, but this one came out as a result of those thoughts that I had dealing with those young children and what the Lord spoke spoke to me about concerning writing the book. So my experience at the Bureau of Women's Affairs opened me up to, and just not just the academic part, but my own exploration into these issues and my exposure, because I went to a lot of meetings locally. I was on different committees, and I went to the UN 2001, just after 911, and that was a very good experience for me. They were creating a world fit for children, and so persons, heads of states were brought to that meeting. Our delegation here was led at it, when I say here in Jamaica, was led at the time PJ Patterson, Prime Minister PJ Patterson, and Marjorie Taylor, who was the children's ambassador, was there, Mary Clark, yes, Gerlin Bean, and I was a part of that team. And when the main team left, I mean, we stayed back at those meetings, and I saw and listened to them and heard how they were negotiating, because and other countries even want some things. And it was a good experience for me at that meeting. There was Nelson Mandela, there was Harry Belafonte, there was a child star, John Mark Jeffries, I think that was his name. So it gave me that experience that I needed, that wanted. And so I put all of my experiences together, and I said, okay, I'm going to focus on this book, and I'm going to put all my energy, my experience, my exposure, everything into this book.
Your exposure, you have been so blessed, and God has really anointed you to go into these areas, to sit on these committees, to listen to the conversations around the whole issue of child abuse. For me, I taught in Jamaica for 18 years, and I have seen the effects of abuse. I've seen the effects of sexual abuse, physical abuse. I've seen neglect. I have seen it all. And I'm from St. Thomas, and one of our biggest issues is the area of sexual abuse, and has become a norm in my parish. And if we go through the schools and the guidance counselors, there's so much work to be done in these areas. Again, how do we begin to really challenge the systems that are causing this abuse in our children? What do you suggest? How do we begin this conversation?
Well, when I was on the National Task Force for Trafficking in Persons, we used 3 Ps as solution. First one is prevention, the second one is protection, and the third P is prosecution. And I think it's fitting for me to use those 3 Ps here again. So in terms of prevention, one of the things we can do is continue public awareness, continue public education. And so like persons who write on the issue, persons who come in contact with children like yourself and others, that's part of the public education. We are educating, we're training, we are changing mindsets concerning how we deal with this. And we're not just going to educate the child, we have to educate all those who are dealing with children, the parents, all duty bearers, and that include caregivers, coaches, all of these persons. So we have to have a voice. Sometimes the children are voiceless. So our voice, we have to let our voices be heard, because some things are considered norm or the norm in some communities. When you talk about sexual abuse, they say, oh, it's just a little sex. If a stepfather or father or family member abuse a girl or even a boy, I mean, it's not any big thing. It's just a little sex. And so we have to continue to drive the nail down into the coffin of these things and bring it to rest, to let it die. So we have to educate. We have to use different means, different channels, because a lot of things are happening now, and we can't just use traditional methods of talking. There is the social media, there is this, there is that. There are so many things. So we who are in this work and want to see a change will have to continue the dialogue, and we have to show the right from the wrong. We have to draw the line down and say, this is wrong and this is right. The other thing, we have to seek to protect our children, and we can protect in different ways. Again, public education can help to protect in terms of us teaching them, training them, causing them to look for signs and signals and red flags, because sometimes you would leave your children, it would have been safe to leave your children with even family members. But when the
Yes.
children
It's no longer
complain
same.
and say, I
Yes.
don't want to stay with uncle, or I don't want to stay with auntie, we have to realize that something is wrong. So we have to seek to protect them. We have to seek to move them out of the environment where the abuse is. Instead of us moving out as adults and leaving the children to suffer, we have to ensure that they are moved out. If they are safe houses or safe places where they can stay, we need to protect them. And the other P is prosecution. We don't talk because we don't want our husbands and our boyfriends
Oh,
and our
yes. Oh, yes.
brothers
Yes.
to go to prison. So we don't talk. And so the prosecutory aspect is not done because we're all silent. We are mum. And one time we used to be concerned about the girls. We also now have to be concerned about our boys because our boys are being abused by both men and women. And we have to know that it's not just girls. I met a not met, but I know a man. He's a man now, but he told me, he says, Auntie, when I was so and you came here to look for me, you didn't know what I was going through. And he told me about a family member who was older than him, who abused him. And to this day, the boy is almost promiscuous, the man, because he's
Wow.
moving from one
Yes.
girl to another, and he believes that his early initiation by this female person who he lived with for a brief period when his father went overseas is affecting him. So I talk
Mm.
about the prevention, the protection, and the prosecution. If we know of any case, do not remain silent. We need to talk, whether it's our brother
Yes.
or our father or something. Then the law needs to have its force, and we need to ensure that the prosecution is taking place. In my mother's time, I realized that a lot of child abuse was
Yes.
taking place
Yes.
because when I think of teenage mothers, most of my family members, when I look back, they were teenage mothers. Right, my father
Yeah.
is a result of
My mom
from
too.
a teenage mother. Right, when
Mm.
I look back, I think my grandmother had him when she was about 16. Her sister, when I look back in her life, I realized that her children were born start when she was a teenager. And so we have to break this cycle of abuse
Yes, we
where our
do. We do.
children are concerned. It is not okay, Jennifer. And we have to let others know that it is not okay. It is a serious business. And if we know it is happening, we need to step in. I know sometimes we do that to our own detriment and at our own risk. But
Yes.
wherever possible, if we can't do it, we have to get the law and we have to keep pounding because sometimes I know the police, they are getting more aware now, but sometimes they were reluctant to act, where certain things are concerned. And I know governments are putting things in place now that we need to use, but we have to protect our children.
You are passionate about this.
Very.
And I can understand why, because our children are facing so many rejection and abuse. Even during the pandemic, we have been heard we heard about so many stories of children going missing, children getting pregnant because we were all locked away and we didn't have much room to move. And that's where many of the abuse happened. And so we appreciate your book, and I want you to talk now about your literary journey. While writing this book, what challenges what obstacles did you face as you wrote the pages of this book? Was there a time when you were overcome with emotions and you just had to stop? Tell us a little bit more about that journey.
The journey has started long ago. I remember looking back in my notes and 40 years ago, because I like to write just notes. You go to church, you take notes, and I
Yes.
look back in my notes and I saw 40 years ago where I said I wanted to write a children's book. And it never happened, but in my mind, I wanted to do something about good news and bad news and using the Bible as good news and what comes out of the newspaper as bad news. I didn't even realize that till I came upon it. But what happened is that my experience now working at the Bureau of Women's Affairs, I realized that I had to go out and I had to talk to children and I listened to them after the workshops. They would come to me and they would tell me, Miss so and so happened and so happened to me. And I say, oh my goodness, this is not good. But then I realized that since I'm not working in that area again, I don't have an opportunity as much to go and talk. So the
Yes.
book came in as a good idea so that I could write down the things that I would have been presenting in workshops. And so the journey started when I I've had various interactions with children. I've taught in Sunday school, and I've taken children, I've rescued them, I've helped them financially and otherwise. So all of those were part of my journey. But when I went to the Bureau of Women's Affairs, I realized that there is a greater part of the journey. So when I started to do these workshops now, I was building up my book and did not know. And so at the end of time, I realized that I had garnered so much information with all of those experiences that it was now time when the Lord said, write the book. I realized that it was now time for me to put all of those things beyond the workshops into something more permanent, into something that would go viral worldwide like we're doing now. And so that is part of my journey. So I started the book, as I told you, for the youngsters, younger ones up to age 6. And then this is a product of it now for teenagers, and I have the other 2 coming. But during the writing of the book, part of the challenges I faced was what do I include? What do I leave out? And I had 2 publishers, a husband and wife team, Homer and Angela Slack, and Angela was down on me. Jennifer, you need to put in this, you need to put in that, you need to do this. And she did even research from me and sent it to me and inserted it in a book. And she said, you need to explain more, you need to do that. So it became, after a while, a little frustrating. I said, oh my God, if I knew it was going to involve all of these things, I don't think I would have started the process. But then the Holy Spirit reminded me that He's the one who caused me to start the process in the first place. So deciding what to put in, deciding what to omit, deciding how many pages I should have, how to construct it. And the Lord gave me those publishers. And I'm telling you, they worked with me. They worked with me. They literally held my hand because I had the information, but I didn't have the know-how. I didn't know what to do. And so they worked with me and they assisted me. And Angela, well, the husband did the more technical part of it, and Angela. And she said to me, Jenny, because I know her a long time. And she said, Jenny, I will edit your book for free. And Angela put her task and she edited and she added and she told me, listen to this, read this. And she gave me information and everything, which really helped me. So I was really helped by my publishers a great deal because when she was saying, sometimes she called me and she said, Jenny, I think you need to expand this. You need to expound on this. And I said to my husband, you know something? I don't think I can bother with it.
It is a journey. It is a tedious journey. Yes.
But I want the book because I thought of a 30-page book. Honestly, I didn't think I was going to do so many pages, but Angela pressed me and she said, Jenny, the information is needed out there. And she praised me. She praised me along the way. And as she continued to praise me, she said, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you. And that helped. When you have somebody just cheer.
It does.
I shared. And so I worked and worked and worked. And in the long run, what she did, she put the book out to some of her peers to get comments. And she gave it to, while she was the editor, she actually exposed the book to some other persons who made comments and made suggestions and said, this is how you need to do it. Shift this here, reword this, entitle this differently, and so the journey, it was tedious, and I didn't get frustrated, but at times I said, oh my God, if I had known that involved so much work, I would not have. And then in the long run, somebody put me on to somebody's in media, and she said, Mrs. Williams, your job has just begun. She said, it's much easier.
It has. Yes.
I said again, oh my God, I didn't realize that it was just so much work. And so I had in the midst of it to be trusting the Lord and to just asking Him to help me, because at times I said, had I known that it was going to be so much work, maybe I would not have taken it on, even though I know that it is the Lord who gave me the thought in the very first place. Indeed, so those were some of my challenges. And in the long run, I feel very pleased. I am pleased about it.
And you have a very profound work out there. Love Me, Don't Hurt Me. It's a profound and inspirational book. And we want you now to take us into the pages, onto the pages of this book, the themes and the messages that you would want your readers or audience to garner from this really, really inspirational book.
Okay, in the beginning, there was God. and there is still God. So I
Yes.
started out on a biblical basis about God and how God has fearfully and wonderfully made them. So it was built up on that. God created a purpose-built world for you, and God created the first family. So I talk about the first family being created in the image of God because we can't deviate from God's creation. Then it says, do you know who you are? And I talk about typical challenges during adolescence. You know, all of these things that happen, and you don't know if you're a child, you're an adult, and you're in that crossing over period. Are you experiencing sexual confusion? And Jennifer, there is so much
Very
confusion.
controversial,
They don't know if
yes.
they are male, if they are female, if they are tree, if they are dog, they don't know. And so,
No.
are you experiencing sexual confusion? I made it clear that when God made the humans, the scripture says that He made them male and
Male
female.
and female, yes.
And I'm not going to deviate from that. And then it talks about establishing social and sexual boundaries. Boundaries are important. And I am just remembering a scripture now that says, "Do not remove the ancient landmarks." While doesn't have anything to do with abuse or anything, but we have to stay within the boundary. So establishing social and sexual boundaries. So that's chapter 2. Chapter 3, you deserve love and friendship. So there's a whole chapter devoted to love, and that's
Yes,
based on
yes.
1 Corinthians 13 and other scriptures, and friendship. What is friendship, and how do we navigate different types of friendship, setting boundaries again, looking for red flags. Do you know your rights? And here I talk about the basic rights, and these rights are based on the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Because although they are teenagers, they are not adults until they get to 18, so they are still covered by the Convention on the Rights of the Child.
Yes,
So
yes, they are.
it's the basic rights and also child protection, which is very important. Then, are you being abused? That's chapter 5. So I spend a lot of time talking about physical abuse and what it means, the boxing and the kicking and all of that, emotional abuse, the name calling, the putting down, all of this. Bullying is very important, and it has been around for a long time. So I put bully in there. That's even at the universal level when they talk about ragging. It's a form of bullying.
It
You
is, it is.
understand?
I remember my college days, and I'm telling you, I was ragged. I hated it, but at that time it was necessary, as you said.
I never experienced it, but I said to myself that if I experience ragging, I think I would retaliate. I wouldn't just sit down and take it. So we talk about bullying and body shaming. MAGA and red and black and freckles and freckle face and all of these things. So body shaming is mentioned there. Then I look at sexual abuse, and we know that rape, incest, all of those things.
Yes.
Then trafficking and smuggling carries its own challenges where teenagers are concerned, because trafficking, of course, we know that they are trafficked for various reasons. Sexual exploitation is one of the main reasons, especially for girls. And smuggling, they can be exploited too, because they want to get from one country to another. The parents want to take them from one country to another, and in the process, abuse can take place. And I talk about spiritual abuse. Sometimes it's something that we tend to take for granted, and children are being abused by even religious leaders, and
sadly, it does happen.
they are being sexually abused emotionally and otherwise. And if you think of even those two cases with Jim Jones and David Koresh, again, where a lot of abuse took place there. And then talk about neglect, abandonment, and rejection. And the next chapter, do you have family problems? So we talk about child shifting, and where children are moved from one parent, one guardian, one caregiver. And I did tell her that I grew up in 3 parishes. And for me, that was a kind of child shifting. I grew up with my great grandmother, and I went to my grandmother, and then I went to my grand uncle. Then when my mother came back from England, I went back to Portland, and then my grandmother was responsible for me. I didn't even realize that I was abused in this way too. because there was a setback in my education because every time I move,
Yes, you
I
have to
go back in
change
the class that
schools.
I came
Yes.
from and that sort of thing. So I talk about child shifting, sibling families where parents, for different reasons, whether they migrate or they find a new family, and leave the children to rear themselves, latchkey and barrel children. Latchkey, we all know you find the key on some place in the house, or it's left with your neighbor, or you collect it from your mother in the market and you open the house. Predators can know that you're there by yourself and can even abuse you. Barrel children, I was a barrel child and I didn't know that. In those days, my mother used to send parcels from England and you go to the post office and you collect it. All of these can cause abuse, and the changing roles of men and women within the home, because women are going out now and men are taking up different roles as well. And because sometimes the family becomes very unstable. And I'm not saying women must stay home, but we have to know how to balance these acts. Dealing with your problems the wrong way. So substance abuse, sometimes the children themselves don't use a substance. They are being told to buy ganja, buy a spliff, buy so and so, and sometimes they are introduced to it as well. And
Yes, yes.
also they are sniffing.
Carriers too.
Yeah, and they are carriers, and they also sniff glue and shoe polish and all of these things to make them very high. Then I talk about harmful images, information, and songs. And if you hear some of the
Yes.
songs that are being sung now, and the
Oh,
things that come across to them by way of pornography and other things, and the information that comes to them, realize that all of these are hurting our children and children who self-harm. They don't talk about what they're going through or what they're experiencing, but they cut themselves, they do all sort of things. And the
yes, yes,
ultimate to self-harm is suicide. And a number of
yes.
children do commit suicide. And are you a vulnerable teenager? That's chapter abilities, children in state care, street and working children, street and working children. And then chapter 9, do you feel safe and secure? So I talk about violence in the home. It could be domestic violence or otherwise, violence in communities. And even in Jamaica and other places, there is a lot of violence in the communities and violence in the schools. Just think of the US
Oh,
alone,
yes.
where so many
Yes, the
children
mass
are.
shootings,
Yes.
horrible.
Then do
Tearing
you
families apart. Wow.
Yes. So do you feel safe and secure? So I talk about violence in the home. Oh, I just read that. Violence in communities and violence in schools. Then abuse is embedded in cultural traditions like child marriage, female genital mutilation. I put in period poverty where girls cannot afford to buy
Or sanitary
sanitary.
napkins.
Yes,
Yes.
so that again, and then child stealing. Up to recently in Jamaica, a child was being stolen from a hospital, and we hear of children being stolen in the park, all of these things. I look at teenage prostitution. Sometimes they are engaged in prostitution of themselves, but sometimes the parents push them into prostitution and
Yes.
in money. Talk about abortion. Abortion can affect the child who is doing the abortion as well as the unborn child. And then I talk about sex selection because it's not a Jamaican book, it's a worldwide book. And so
It
in
is,
some
certainly is.
Yes,
Yes.
they select preferably the boy, and so the girl is either aborted or mistreated. So sex selection, and I talk about witchcraft, cults and occults, that either children are engaged in or the adults will engage the children in these. And again, the David Koresh case and the Jim Jones and all of these things.
Yes.
And even in Jamaica, their children were wearing protective bands, guard rings. I
Yes.
don't know if
Yes.
you read
Yes.
that. So that's witchcraft, pulse and occult. In chapter 11, are you aware of your environment? So I talk about environmental risk assessment, accidents in the home, on the road, and accidents at school. And then I look at things like natural disasters, whether it's earthquake, pandemic, hurricane, things like this, how children need to be protected. For example, even within shelters, we have to make sure that we're not putting children in a shelter with predators who will abuse them because those spaces are so tight. And I look at infectious diseases, epidemics, epidemics and pandemics. And you mentioned earlier about the pandemic and the literature and the reading and the experience that are coming to us now is that children were even more abused during the pandemic period. Right. And then I said you can make a difference. And I talk about roles for the teenagers, roles for the caregivers. And part of the teenagers' role is like don't take rides from strangers, report abuse and things like those, and responsibilities for adults that they need to care for the children and that. And then I also have a sample prayer for the teenagers and a sample prayer for the adults. And I have 2 points that I wrote myself. One is who is minding the children, and the other one, love me, don't hurt me, and conclusions. But just to quickly say also that each chapter is divided into 3 parts. The first one is a narrative. So if I'm talking, for example, about physical abuse, I'll say what it is and I'll give examples. Then there's an interactive workbook section. So after I list the things, I might say, can you give some more examples of physical abuse, or have you been physically abused, or ask questions for them to write. And then the last part of the chapter is the biblical thing. What does the scripture say? You understand? Whether it is saying children are a heritage of the Lord and the fruit of the womb is his reward. So
That's
there are
where everything
scriptures.
starts, yeah.
There are 2 avatars going through the book. They are teenagers. So the teenagers can identify with avatars. It's an avatar age. And so I have that there again. And at the end of each chapter, the avatars are affirming or saying, I didn't know this. And at the end, I have learned so and so, not to laugh at a disabled child or so and so. So they are there. And at the end of the book, the avatars are also encouraging persons to be advocates. So that's the gist of the book, basically, in a nutshell. And it has 13 chapters, and it has pages for notes and all of that they can write. And it's very graphic, has a lot of pictorials in it, and the print is very large, so that we know teenagers don't like to read, sorry. So it is really appealing to them, to read and to be engaged in the process.
You have a very full book, and each chapter can spark multiple discussions. What are your future plans for this book? Because looking at the chapters, you can spend months discussing one chapter.
Right.
Because there's so many issues to this, so many areas to explore.
It's a lot, and
Yes,
I
it
don't
is.
expect them to read it off all at once. It's like a manual, it's a tool, it's a guide. So they take bite-sized pieces from it and dissect it and ingest it. So I had invited the Ministry of Education to the launch. The Child Protection and Family Services, formerly CDA, was also invited. I gave them a copy of the book, and the Guidance Counselors Association in Education was invited. I gave her a copy of the book. I try to engage our children's advocate. So I need to take a copy of the book to her, put a copy in the National Library and one in the library at Tom Redcam. And I plan through the Ministry of Education or responsible persons to go into schools with the books and other spaces, churches. Since I am in North America, I've been promoting the book in churches as well. So I'm using every avenue. I have a marketing plan to advertise the book, and I also want to get the message to be out there wide and far. And I have the other 2 books coming as well, and I also have one that I'm going to write for adults, and that one, I think I'm going to name it Unmasking Christian Marriages. So all of those are within the context of Love Me, Don't Hurt Me. So the book, I hope to do a number of things through the bookshops. I approached 3 bookshops before I left Jamaica. I'm going to go back there to see how I can get the books in the bookshops, in the schools, in the libraries, in different hands, so that they can use this as a tool to protect our children. And also, even through these virtual book tour here and it being on different platforms, be it Facebook, YouTube, or otherwise, that persons will get the message and help us to protect our children.
Wonderful initiatives. And where can persons access this book? Do you have it on Amazon?
The book is available on Amazon.
Yes.
And I have put my website in the chat, and it has the Amazon link as well. I have a few copies in Jamaica. I sold some. I gave out some complimentary copies as well. When I go back, I'm going to purchase some more for sale in Jamaica. So persons can contact me at 1-876 can also email me at Jenny G will go to JENNYGILLGO2 at gmail.com, or they can email me at jennygwillgo@yahoo.com. So Jenny G will go to at Gmail and Jenny G will go at yahoo.com. So it's JENNYGILLGO2 at gmail.com or JENNYGILLGO at yahoo.com. And you go on Amazon and you put in Love Me, Don't Hurt Me by Jennifer Giscombe Williams, and it is there.
This is
So I
just
give you
beginning for
just give you my
you.
contact again.
Yes, please do.
1-876-873-1366, and I live in Jamaica, but I'm not in Jamaica just now.
Wow, this is just beginning. This is just the tip of the iceberg, because this book
Yes.
has so many layers to it, and it transcends so many different countries. These are global topics, you know, and even when you spoke about body shaming, there's, you know, in China right now, the young people, they're starving themselves. The girls need to look pale and thin. And if you don't, then you're at the back of the class. And it's such a, these are such broad but very, very critical issues to discuss. And I believe that as you venture out into the different worlds and different countries, to put your book an awareness that these issues are critical. These issues are what we need to address now. We need to unravel, unmask some of these issues in our countries, in our communities, and really deal with them, because we are raising children who are becoming adults, and these adults are ineffective. They are troubled. They are suicidal. They are depressed. Can you imagine what our world would be like in the next 10 to 15 years? It's troubling to think about. So thank you so much for sharing about this book on our virtual book tour and on this platform. And we continue to promote your work as you go through being strategic and being anointed by God to really put this work out there. We appreciate your work, your commitment to this, and of course your publishers, your family, your church members, and everyone who has helped you on this journey. That's just been a wonderful, wonderful story, and we congratulate you for this
Thank you
achievement.
so much. And I just want to thank you too,
Yes.
Jennifer. I didn't know that I'll be going, worldwide when I started this journey, but just through linking with Dr. Stephanie Fletcher. I don't even know her
Yes.
personally, but she's like a friend, and she linked me up, and I was able to link with you, Lisan, and the others. I appreciate this so much. You wouldn't understand. Thank you so much. And I think you're doing such a wonderful work. I didn't even know such a thing existed. Guys, when you talk to me, I sounded a little confused in the beginning. I didn't know where and what to do and what all of this. But I'm understanding the process now, and I'm understanding what you're doing. And I just want to say, God bless you and bless the work that you're doing. You're doing a good job. So blessings.
Blessings, and thank you so much. And thank you for being on our show today. And of course, continue to promote and put your work out there, because this is going to break barriers, it's going to break systems, and it's really going to transform families and lives. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much. Thank you. Blessings.